I'm tired of messing with this camera. You may notice that we are in a car. You can probably tell stuff behind us, the sun keeps moving. So the light's gonna change and the sound's gonna change, but I am trying to do this as best that I can. Also, I'm in frame this week because I'm the only one in frame, and this is just basically a shot of my head. Anna's driving the car. We are going to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill because we realized that all our library books are due. We have about 20 books out on Arabian mythology, and they all need to go back to the library today. So you're traveling with us, and that ends up being okay because the thing we're going to talk about today, I think I was going to talk about by myself anyway. It's generally something I do most of the work for, and it's been something a lot of people have been asking for, like one question a week about it, and I want to help everybody, but it's a really hard thing to kind of help with. So here I go. Alright, the crafting system for my games. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying really hard to keep this camera right here. The crafting system for our games. You have to have the ability to have the forge purview, kind of. We use industry. Something where gods, scions, demigods can create items. There's such a big basis in mythology for the crafting god, the one or two gods per pantheon who makes stuff. And this stuff is magical, and everybody can use this stuff because the gods have some, and the heroes have some, and they're these giant magical gifts that they can kind of bestow on people. You run into a lot of problems with it though, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to talk about the problems first, then talk about how it works in our games and how I think maybe you could use it to help your games as well. First of all, relics can be really powerful, like super fucking powerful, and that's why generally people only get them as rewards from gods, maybe for incredible missions, or you take them from people, or it could be something that you get at hero and demigod and god. Like, these are your birthrights, these are your super important powers, and they should be rare. So how do you take something that should be rare and make it into something that one of the PCs can just do? Because if they can just pump those out, if there's not a massive cost for them, first of all, your group kind of needs a guy who does that so that they can have all these infinite powers. And also, why isn't the world just full of these? Like, if obviously the gods aren't active right now, and so they're not making them right now, right? It's the same question as why aren't there lightning bolts that Zeus is throwing down all the time anymore? So obviously it's not happening now. But because these things last forever, because these are relics, why wasn't Hephaestus pumping out millions of them? Like, he made a bunch for a lot of people, but if they're easy to make in any way, why didn't he make like 100,000 of them, and everybody has everything? Everybody has an Aegis, and then they can't lose. Why didn't that happen? And you have to make sure that it can't be so easy that could happen now, right? Like, if every group of Scions you have has an industry guy, and that industry guy is just pumping out relics, it's just going to unbalance the world in both a math standpoint of just the actual powers that are out there, but also in a world building standpoint. Like, the world won't make sense, and that's a really big thing for me. So it should be for you if you're good at gaming. So that's one of the major problems. Second major problem is just the process of giving someone the powers to make stuff and just balancing that. The many balancing things are, people have powers, they want to be able to use them once in a while. They want to see the powers effects in game for them pretty often. But like we talked about, they can't do that all the time. So you get this weird balance issue if you want the player to be able to make relics because they're a relic making person, but you don't want them to be able to do it all the time. And how do you kind of balance and merge those two concepts to make something good? And then how do you balance it? And I guess that we'll talk about balance a little later, the ways that you can balance it. And then if it's an entire purview, how do you differentiate? How do you make some good stuff at hero for crafting, and then some really, like, and then it starts to get better at demigod, and then by god they're able to make these amazing things, but you still have to let them make them not all the time. So that's difficult. The other difficulty is, what is it that relics can do? The books just are fucking horrible about it. I tend to be better about it. I try to harness things in, redistribute like what point values are for stuff, but it still gets really weird. I had a talk with somebody on the boards earlier last week about how, well, all my players just get relics that have all the immunities on them, all the like low level 1 and 2 level boons, and then they just are immune to everything. And that's horrible. I got rid of that a long time ago. The boons on relics thing, that's just shitty. And I know a lot of people probably really like that, and I'm sure a lot of players like it, but it's completely unbalanced and actually lowers the power of purviews. But I don't want to get into that right now. The important part is relics shouldn't be able to do that. They shouldn't be able to mimic god powers quite like that, but they should be able to enhance certain god powers in certain ways. So they should make the things that the person does with that relic a little better. And it should be on a sliding scale somehow so that they can stay useful as they go up in Legend if they are important items to them. I'll stop there and talk about a quick thing that came to my mind about relics and why they're important to be really have their own idea. If you go to the monomyth thing, I talked about it a few weeks ago, the hero at some point gets an item that helps him succeed. Link and his sword in all the Zelda games. Wow, it's the only one I can think of right now. Give me an example. What?
The gay Bolga for Cuckoo.
The gay Bolga for Cuckoo Lane, where they earn an item, and that item becomes so much a part of them that they're able to succeed greatly, and then from then on it's their thing. That's an important part of the myth cycle, and it's an important part of every hero's journey. And if they have 12 items and nothing that really stands out, nothing that connects it to them, so if they're walking through town, someone doesn't say, oh, he's carrying the gay Bolga because that's fucking Cuckoo Lane and he's gonna murder town people. If he's just got like 12 swords and a gun and a shield and a hat, and he's got all these things, it clutters all that. And so that's another reason why we can't have relics just all over the place doing all the things. Ways to fix it. You gotta balance it with cost and time. Those are generally the two things I use to balance stuff. If stuff costs a lot of legend, then you can balance it like that, but then depending on games, sometimes legend doesn't seem to be worth that much, or if they're an Aztec crafting god, then they could pump out items still. Another thought would be to use permanent willpower as something that costs XP, but then the relics cost XP, and then your friends want you to make stuff that's going to cost you permanent XP, and you definitely can't do it too often, and that gets a little muddy and weird too. The other possibility is time. If these things take a lot of time to craft, then you can say, well, the game's only going to last 2 months, or like this stuff's really important to do, so you can't do it right now. But when you have downtime, when we stop for a month and everybody goes back to their family for a little bit, then you could start crafting, and then you can get all the things done. It's difficult because that's not exciting. Maybe that's one of the problems with the craft god role in general, is that's not an exciting role. He plays such an important part in myth, but it's not the part that's on the front lines, the part that the story's about. And so, but you want your craft god in your game to be someone who's also the center of the story. not someone that the rest of the heroes go, oh, awesome, we're gonna go fight this great thing, but we need an item. Can you go make it for us, and we'll wait, and then we'll go off and do some cool stuff, and you make another item for us. So those are all the difficulties. And if I had good answers that I felt worked for everyone's game, that dealt with those difficulties in a way I felt comfortable with, I would write that and I would give it to you, and you would have the crafting system that everyone has been begging for. But I don't think those problems are fixable on a grand scale. Unless everyone out there was using all my rules and I could like backseat ST for them for a few weeks and kind of train everyone personally, which I don't think would be good for anyone, except I do, but I don't. If I could do that for everybody, and then everybody could use my crafting system like perfectly, then I think maybe it could work, but I don't think it would work for everyone, and I don't think it would pan out that way. So I don't have a system that I think is going to look good in writing, and it's going to be balanced, and it's going to be good. And I know it's what everybody wanted, and I apologize that you're not going to get that. But what you can get is what I do for crafting, and you can take that and maybe mold it for your system, and hopefully the way you guys play, you can succeed a little. Hold on, I need to know where to go. My crafting system. We've had 2 or 3 crafters throughout the game. One only dealt with hero. It was a Tom's character, and he made useful stuff as a crafter that wasn't magical yet. So he put, and this is what I think most people who have crafters in their game, this is the kind of stuff they do. He put rocket engine in the car, and then he gave it infinite fuel, and he worked on some plans for building stuff in the future. Like, this is, let's say, how does Nemean armor work? I'm going to start planning how to do that. I never got past the planning point. But he did augment with current technology and a little advanced technology the items that they had. This was fairly easy to balance. You don't have to do a whole lot, and as the ST you can kind of rein stuff in. And for that kind of stuff, it was just a simple, well, I want to make a rocket engine. Okay, well, you know how you have science rockets, rocket fuel, whatever the fuck you had, and you have craft, metallurgy, and car something. I don't remember. He had the stats that were appropriate, and it wasn't magical doing, so there's no legend that needs to be spent. He's just working on normal stuff. So me and the player go, generally, I'll keep running the game, and he'll go and do a little research. And I'll come back and say, okay, well, here's some stuff, here's what rock fuel does, here's the kind of materials I'll need. Okay, cool. And then the character, what I have for them is, okay, roll int plus your science once every 12 hours. And that's going to be you taking time off, going and researching or writing or planning. It's important to write stuff down, unless they have perfect memory, to kind of get the formulas and stuff on paper. Even if they don't have perfect memory, it's just helpful. So they go and sometimes it's in a laboratory, or sometimes it's in a college, or sometimes it's just in the trunk of the car they're traveling in. He's got a flashlight and he's writing it on the inside. You know, whatever's appropriate for the character. Every 12 hours he rolls int plus the science, and then comes up with a number, and he just starts adding those together. And I have in my head a theoretical target number that he's going to hit. And depending on the difficulty, there's a minimum that he's got to hit for every roll. So, for example, if you were going to make the rocket engine, I would say, okay, well, that's something humans have a pretty difficult time with. They haven't even really invented it yet. So an actual rocket scientist would have some struggles with it, but he could do it. So let's say, and it would take him a long time. So the minimum to successfully make the roll count is a 4. So if you roll and you get 4 successes, then anything you do for that roll counts. If you got only, let's say, 3 successes, then you couldn't even start to comprehend the formulas and work you needed to do to make that successful. And that kind of represents a college algebra student can't make a rocket engine. Even if he rolls 1,000,000 times, he's never going to make the rocket engine. He just doesn't have the ability. So, but as long as you get plus 4 or more, then your roll counts. Let's say every roll he gets 10 on average. So he starts adding those together, and I say, well, you know, take a scientist, you know, X amount of years to figure this out. Let's say to figure it all out, he needs 100. He needs 100 on his science roll, and once he gets enough rolls, enough 12-hour periods to add all that up, you know, he can deed if he wants to. You can add all your bonuses. You can channel any of those rolls. Once he gets all of that done, then at the end of 100, he's like, all right, I figured it out. I know the process, I know the materials, I know everything I need to do. And once he's done that once, if he writes it down or has perfect memory, then he can recreate that rocket engine as often as he wants to. He can go take it to a company. He could give everyone rocket engines. Then the next step is getting all the materials, and that's usually some role-playing and some people going in and getting stuff for him or just buying it. And then it's the crafting. I tend to base the crafting on how hard it is, how hard it would be. But then sometimes I just make it exactly what the other number was. So let's say 100 again. So he goes through the same process, but with the dex craft of whatever craft is appropriate. As long as he has the right materials, he can pump that out. There are some industry boons that help with that, but for the most part, you get the right materials and you start working on it. As long as you have the correct tools, then I let him roll their normal roll. If they're missing some tools, or if like he needs a laser but he's working with a hammer, then as long as he's strong enough to basically laser with a hammer, then I would just give him a couple minuses, like maybe -4 dice on every roll. And if he has the actual laser, I would give him, you know, no dice. He wouldn't have any negatives. And then if he has something even better, if he's like maybe crafted a super laser that makes this easier, then I'll give him some bonus dice. Also, they can stunt any of these rolls, and generally our players do try to stunt every single roll through the process just to give it flavor. But then sometimes in the middle, they get bored and they're just like, I just roll, just rolling. But then towards the end, they're like, I'm finishing it, so I'm going to do it. So he crafts and crafts and spends those 12 hours again building and whittling his thing, and then it gets to 100, and he's like, okay, I've finished the rocket engine. It's in the car, now we have a rocket engine. Hopefully we have some rocket fuel, or he's got the industry boon to let him use fuel, and then success. He's completed his project. It took a while. It helps the group. He didn't have to leave for too long, and he didn't have to like obliterate his resources to do it. And he can still be a character that does other stuff through the story. I think that's a really good representation of how that character niche can fit well. An important part is I don't tell them what number they're going for. Sometimes I do for the crafting bit, because it could make sense for the character to know that. And as they're going along, they're seeing it progress and seeing them succeed. But for the science bit, I never let them know what their target role is, because a big important part of it is that they're learning and expanding, and they don't know that they'll get it until they get it. And that helps them not meta crap like you wouldn't know a monster's EV generally. So you shouldn't also know your target number for that. You shouldn't know what you're going for. They shouldn't know that, okay, well, as long as I legendary deed this, I'm going to succeed. So yeah, I think that character had a really good run. He fit the niche well, and that's a good idea of what crafting can do at Hero. He's not a good example, I guess. Our other big crafter was Sophia, and she really did the relic making thing. She was Athena and Hephaestus' kid, and so she had lots of crafting in her blood, and she really like grabbed onto that and made it something she did. And she also didn't mind, you know, being out of the scene for a while to make stuff. She made a lot of low-level relics, and then started making stronger relics as she went on. You can do the science roll first. It's something appropriate. So let's say she was like, I want to make a magic car that flies. Okay. She starts thinking and graphing and figuring out just like he did for the rocket engine. Except, because it's magical, the cost is a legend per roll. I think that's what we did every 4 hours. A legend per roll. And she could roll every... At the time, I think I was doing every 4 hours. She could roll and add it together, but I had a much bigger target number when I worked on the system again, and no one's kind of used it since. But they spend 5 legend per magical roll, but then the number they need is much lower, and they roll every 12 hours. So I would say go with that. That's the better system. Is they spend 12 hours, they spend 5 legend, and then she rolls her in science roll like normal. So magic rocket car, very similar science rocketry or astrophysics or whatever. Then let's say in the old system we're spending 1 legend, the target number would be 1,000. Spending 5 legend, the target number would only be like 200. So she's doing the same thing. She's making rolls. She's sciencing through. If the character also had parallel attention and
meditative focus,
and the one multitasking, I would let them probably spend a little bit for a scene to let them like be crafting kind of while they're fighting or while they're doing other stuff like in the back of their head. But same thing, rolling your int science rolls over and over again for every 12 hours you're working on it. Spending the legend this time though to represent an expenditure of legend and to help them like get fate bonds to crafting if they're on the world. And then building up to 200. At the end of 200, then they say, okay, well, I know how to make this rocket car. It's going to fly, but it's going to need these magical properties. I'm going to need to go get, I always use phoenix feathers. I don't know why. All right, some griffin feathers, or maybe a griffin beak to like churn up. And you just kind of be really creative with the stuff they might need. And if the player wants to help you with that, I generally give them bonuses during their science process. We're like, okay, well, during this science roll, I'm figuring out what mythical creature I'll need. And if they come in to help with that, then kudos to them, and I'll give them dice for that. But some good ones would be maybe some griffin feathers, or you know, some dragon claws, or you know, dragon teeth, something for the tires, maybe for the flying rubber. I don't know. Once they find out all magical properties that they will need, then they can go on adventures to get those magical properties. The ST gets to come up with some really neat ideas. Where is that creature? What kind of stuff will that creature have? Maybe a whole stories based on getting these items. So that really brings the craft god to the forefront as a character, and then also makes the entire party kind of part of getting this thing, so that it's not something that happened off screen, but can really be part of something that happened on screen. So they can get all these items, however long that takes. Maybe they've collected some items, and maybe they have some on hand. And the industry purview should help with making those items into the magic thing. Then once they've collected everything, it goes back to, not the drawing board, the opposite of that, the crafting table. And that person starts working through it. Same Dexcraft roll, and they're working through towards that pinpoint number. They're spending 5 legend every 12 hours, and they're building it. And this should be a really intense, awesome scenario where they're taking it all and, you know, like forming the relic and melting stuff down and everything they need to be able to do to make it until it's finally done. And this should take a long time and be as epic as possible, so that it's awesome for the player who is the craft god. Then once all that happens, you should have a relic. The pricing of the relic I would do similar to the pricing of a normal relic. You're going to make it a birthright. And then for the rolls, like the int and craft rolls that you're going for, should be based on the number of dots, and then kind of just based on the power that it has. And I could lower the craft roll the more mythical items they have involved and the kind of better idea they have for what it's going to be. Also, size should play a part in the craft roll. But the main reason that I can't give you just some rules for this is it's really more important to play it on the fly, to know all the concepts I've been talking about and the ways to balance it, and the making sure it's an important part of the story and that there aren't too many relics around. And you have to have all of that kind of in your brain, and then from that you need to come up with the numbers organically. Just looking, especially having the player be able to look at a set of numbers and figure stuff out, not only detracts from the whole concept of what they're doing, but it's going to end up unbalancing things later. And you don't want to go, well, I did all the stuff in the book and all the stuff you said and it didn't work, because it's just not going to. Like, there's just too many factors that add into it that can make it good or bad. So I think it's more important, and the thing I always do is take all the factors that have been a part of it so far, and one of those factors could even be how recently they've been crafting relics, or how long it's been, or lots of stuff like that, or, you know, if that player's had a cool part in the story recently. And you really got to take all those factors and put them together, and then come up with your numbers from that, how difficult it is from that giant mass of numbers that you massage to find your answer. And it's not something that I can just tell you. If you told me all the information for that particular scenario, I could give you a number. But for each scenario, it's going to be different, and you would be only hindering yourself by trying to get a specific mechanical thing for each thing. I think it's just like tailoring NPCs and combats to the PCs that you have and what's been happening so far in the game. It's the same exact thing as that, except the combat for them is this player's story of crafting things. And so it's going to be really tailored to your specific situation and what's happening. So there you go. I think I'm done. I basically told you nothing. The reason I want to do this on the video is because I think explaining all that would take me like a million days, and would be just a really long bullshit thing to read. But hopefully in the video format you were able to get some of that stuff across, and I apologize. I wish that I could give you just the set rules, and I'm always working on it, and maybe one day I will be able to just give you the rules for crafting that all make sense, but I've worked a lot on it, trying to get it there, and I've just decided that it's not going to get there in any kind of reasonable time frame, and it may never. It may be an actual impossible thing. When we come out with the set of relics, I think there may be some notes under some of them that give you an idea of the kind of craft rolls you'll need to make them, to make something similar. And that might help people, but I think coming from a place of nothing and just giving this giant swath of rules for creating possibly everything, I think is impossible. So I apologize that it's not what you wanted, but hopefully this answers a bunch of the crafting questions that have been happening. Hopefully this helps you a little bit, and maybe you'll have more questions from here that I can answer better, but yeah, I think that's everything. So thank you guys. Thank you.
We're here.
Yes, and we're here at the library, but thank you for listening and dealing with the car trip video. I hope it turns out good. As usual, there's a possibility that this is not going to work at all. But thank you, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.